those hopes and dreams. And we've talked about this before. We're quite different than our husbands are.
Yeah.
So what are some things that make that difference obvious in you and Dave?
Well, first of all, let me say that the largest majority of people, not everyone, but the largest majority of people are married to someone that's quite different than they are. We're kind of attracted to what we don't have, but we don't really know that.
Right.
And God does it on purpose, because where I'm weak, Dave is strong, and where he's weak, I'm strong. And God has purposely put us together in a way where we need each other.
Right.
We don't necessarily want to need somebody sometimes, but he doesn't give any one person all of it. So we work together, and a man should leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, that the two might become one.
Right.
And so if you can learn to walk in love, and if you realize, I think we get married, and of course, everybody's on their best behavior when you're dating. And I didn't even know Dave played golf till we got married, because while we were dating, which for us wasn't very long because we got married pretty quick, but everything was about me. And then all of a sudden,
That's the way it should be.
and then all of a sudden it wasn't all about me. And I didn't realize at that time that God creates us all differently. I mean, I just really didn't. I'd never heard any kind of teaching on that or read any kind of books on that. And, 53 years ago when Dave and I got married, there wasn't a lot of material available like that. And so, we're very different. Like, I'm a big talker. He's a little more quiet, although seems like in the last few years he's holding his own pretty much with the talking.
He's catching up.
He's catching up. But we don't necessarily like a lot of the same things. Like, he loves sports, and it's just, I don't really enjoy just sitting and watching a sport on TV.
Yeah.
Because of what was going on with me in my childhood. My dad never let me take part in any school activities or any after-school sports, and he didn't like sports, and so we never watched them at home. And so it was just something that I have no frame of reference for. And so, Dave loves them. I don't. We don't have the same taste at all when it comes to decorating. Dave wants everything in a room to stand out, and I want it all to blend or to match.
Yeah.
And until you figure out that you have to let people be who they are, and that you cannot get married with the idea in mind that I'll change them.
Right.
I think that's really one of the major causes for divorces, is because we lack the ability. Well, we don't lack the ability, but we're not willing to love people where they're at. We want to love them the way we want them to be.
Sometimes you don't even realize that.
Well, yeah, you don't. You don't even realize what the problem is. You just think, what is wrong with you?
Exactly. Why aren't you like this? Why don't you think about this like I do?
Yeah.
And when you talk about the fact that we balance each other out, and that's why God brings us together, it makes so much sense. It's such a beautiful concept. But when you're in the middle of it, sometimes it's just like, what are you thinking?
Yeah.
Why don't you feel this way because I do?
Yeah, like, what's the matter with you?
Right.
How could you like that?
So I've had times where I've just wished my husband was different, wished he would be more this way, because
I had a lot of those times.
We could accomplish this, right? And so how have you dealt with some of those times where, I wish Dave would be more whatever?
Well, first of all, a funny story. I was telling Dave one time, I wish you were, more aggressive, or I wish you were more this or that. And he looked at me and he said, you better thank God that I'm the way I am, because if I wasn't, you sure wouldn't be doing what you're doing. And I thought, And I realized God gave me exactly what I needed. Because really, how many men would be secure enough, confident enough in who they are in Christ, to let their wife be the one who's in front of people all the time, where they take more of a behind the scenes role. And the things that Dave has done in the ministry are just as important, but they're not the things that people notice. Like, he's done such a phenomenal job overseeing the finances of the ministry and just so many other things. I mean, Dave was the one that got me on radio, and he was the first one that got the vision for us to go on TV. And he just saw things in me that I didn't even see. God put in my hands a book on personalities, a book by Tim LaHaye called The Spirit Controlled Temperament. It's an old book. And there's other people who teach on these different temperaments that we have. I like to say that we're all born with a God-given temperament, and then that temperament plus things that happen to us in the early years of our life is what gives us our personality. That book was a lifesaver and possibly a marriage saver for me, because when I read it, it talked about all the different weaknesses and strengths that the different personality types have. It's like, once I realized that he couldn't help it.
It's a good way to look at it.
And that I couldn't either.
Right.
You know, now that doesn't mean you don't work with God to overcome your weaknesses, but I'm probably always going to talk more than Dave. There's going to be, we're never going to decorate a room together. He likes what I do, but it's just not what he would do. I mean, he'll see a picture, and if he likes it, he wants to buy it and put it somewhere, even if it's like, I don't know, something that has nothing to do with the rest of the theme of our house. And what about you and Tim? How are you different?
Oh, in every way possible. I'm much more outgoing. I like to be busy. I definitely talk more than he does. I'm more of the organized creative, but he's more the engineer. So personality-wise, we're quite different. But one thing that we really learned during the quarantine is that he needed to talk more than he realized. And when he wasn't at work, to talk to people all the time about server racks and power supplies, I had to hear all of it. So I learned more than I ever wanted to know. Because he has more words to use than he realized.
Yeah.
So we do learn a lot about ourselves.
And that really is a challenge. I've found, like, if Dave likes to read to me. Like, if he's reading something that he's really enjoying, he wants to read it to me. And I don't necessarily want to hear it. And he doesn't just read me the part that's real interesting. He likes to start way up here somewhere, because he's real detailed. Yeah. And I'm like, can you just give me the bottom line?
That is just like us.
Just give me the bottom line. Or he'll tell me about the movie he watched last night. And I'm like, just give me the bottom line of this movie. But I mean, he starts at the very beginning, and I'm like, if you're trying to get me to watch this, you've ruined it, because
there's no point.
But Dave and I get along really good now, but we've learned, and especially me, because most of the conflict was me, I've just learned you have to let people be who they are. And the Bible says that we will have to, doesn't put it in these words, but put up with people's weaknesses, and you really can't. You have to accept people and love them where they're at. And if you're going to pray for God to change somebody, always be sure that you pray for God to change you too. Got to be kind of careful that your prayers are not full of pride and they're wrong, and so change them. I always say, I'd really like this to change in Dave, but I know that I have issues too. So only if it's your will, and, change me too. Yeah. And I think too, Ginger, if you don't give up on a marriage when those things are hard, you do get to the point where, I mean, some of the things that Dave does that used to just irritate me no end, I think are funny now. Like, one of the things he does is he talks during movies.
Out loud?
Yeah, out loud. and like he'll ask me a question about the movie, And I'm like, I'm watching this too.
I said that same
I haven't
phrase.
seen it.
We're both watching this at the
Yeah,
same
we're watching
time.
this at the same time. Some things you just have to accept, and your perspective is so important. It's like, if all you do is think about the things that are wrong with the person you're married to, that's all you're going to see. But I purposely sat down one day and I made a list of the things I thought was wrong with Dave. And then I made a list of all the things that I really love about him. And thankfully, that list was a lot longer. Because really, to be honest, I don't know how many men could have put up with me and all the junk from my past that I had to get over, which was a lot. I mean, after being sexually abused for all those years and, my mother not helping me with the situation, and then married the first guy that came along, and he hurt me and ran around with other women, and that was a big disaster. And so, I mean, I had a lot of junk that I didn't know that I had. And, I mean, Dave stuck it out, was patient, and God seemed to give him understanding, and he did confront me, but not too soon. It gave me time to get a decent relationship with God first. And, I mean, he definitely 100% is the perfect man for me, and really a tremendous man of God.
You're right. Those things that you wanted to change at one point are the things that I really value and appreciate in Tim.
Yeah.
Because it is what God needed for me.
Right.
And if we can give God the opportunity and the time without getting
Right.
in the way, he can do some wonderful things through our differences.
And also to realize that, so many people today bail on a marriage. I mean, it's like, well, we had irreconcilable differences. I think that's hilarious, because really, who doesn't? I mean, you can reconcile them if you let God be your partner in the marriage if you want to. And if there's abuse or, alcoholism, drug addiction, things like that, cause abuse in the marriage, then that's a different story. I'm divorced. I was divorced when I was 22 years old because the guy I was married to was a cheat, a thief, and a liar, and it just was not a viable situation. But I just really encourage people not to bail on your marriage if there's any way that you can make it work, because you are going to have situations the next time you get married to. You're not going to marry somebody that's going to suit you perfectly, 100%. I don't care who they are.
So out of all that you've learned then, with the differences between the two of you over the years, what would you say is the most important thing that you've learned?
I really think it is good for people if they do some study about the different temperament types, because that is really an eye-opener. I mean, you can see it so clearly. I mean, how can you have 4 or 5 children come from the same set of parents and all of them be totally different?
Yeah, very different.
I mean, you have to understand that people are born different, and it's he does it on purpose. And I think that if you can understand that there's not something wrong with you because you're different than me.
Or them, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
God did it.
Yeah.
And so you can't get mad at God or blame God. And you have to have enough humility to understand that everybody doesn't have to be like you. That I think is the key. We always think, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you not like me? But who says that I'm so perfect and don't have issues to deal with myself? All I know, I'll say this, and then we'll leave people with their prayers and thoughts. Unless there's like abuse or some kind of a real severe situation,